Thank you. You may be seated. calling, calling for you and for me. See on the portals, he's waiting and watching for you and for me. Come home, come home, ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come home. Why should we tarry when Jesus is pleading, pleading for you and for me? Why should we linger and heed not his mercies? Mercies for you and for me. Come home, come home, ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly,
Mike, you ready to sit for a while?
Sir.
All right. Bible tells us to make a joyful noise. And my dad was really good at making a joyful noise. Carrie Underwood has a special talent at making a joyful noise, especially in singing one of Dad's favorite hymns of all time, Softly and Tenderly. Couple rules for the next little while. This is a day of celebration. It is okay to laugh during a funeral. I'm going to do my best to try to make you do that. Certainly okay to cry, but only let that be for separation. Because Dad is where he wanted to be all along. He's not in any pain. We just feel pain because the phone calls when we need a friend won't be there for a while. I get that. But look at today as a day where a man got reunited with his wife of 65 plus years and his firstborn son. That's the way I like to look at today. I also like to look at it as take 2 of the Martin Parade to Heaven. My mom, August 19th last year, and Dad, May 21st this year. And with the completely unexpected death of my brother in May of 2017, that just leaves me as the sole surviving member of the party of 4 that Dad used to call us whenever we went to Ryan's or Golden Corral or Western Sizzling on Sunday after church. Or if we were lucky, after the afternoon service, the morning service, and the evening service in one day. A lot of familiar faces from Mom's ceremony, or Mom's service 9 months ago. Sorry that the antebellum folks could not be here today with transportation issues, but feel free to tell everybody the service is being taped, and you will have a chance to revisit what is about to happen in front of you at about 7 o'clock tonight. And Heritage keeps it on the website under Dad's obituary for an unlimited period of time. Mom's is still up, if you will. I have a whole lot of props up here. This has been, the last week has been a journey for me more than anything else. Going through Mom's 22 different folders of stuff. Talking to an enormous number of you, an enormous number of people who couldn't be here today, about Dad. I am intimidated by his legacy. He was always just Dad to me. Brother Bill, Reverend Martin, Papa Bill, Reverend William T. Martin, Brother Bill, Daddy Bill. He was all that to you. He was Dad to me. And I've been out of the house now about 40 years, and whenever I would talk to him, we would talk to him, he'd just always just, oh yeah, still keeping on here. Wouldn't spend much time at all about what he's up to, but would spend a ton of time about what are you up to. Little did I know how much he was doing when he was keeping on, based on all the stories that he's told me about his impact on you. And I'm still amazed at the age of 93 how many living friends he still has that are here today. First off, I want to thank everybody on behalf of myself. My name is Jim, by the way. I am his youngest son. My wife, Barbara. Daughter, Ashley, who has already had a very exciting morning. We live in Atlanta. Ashley lives in a little area outside Atlanta called Serenbe. And apparently last night, our 3rd perfect grandson, and I use the word perfect with some elasticity, but our 3rd perfect grandson decided in the middle of the night, I think he was having such an exciting dream, that this was the last day of school coming up. I'm going to the beach after school's over, and Papa Bill named me in his will for some Lego. He was so excited that he rolled himself out of his big boy bed in the middle of the night. and hit the only spot on the floor that probably wasn't protected by the breaking his clavicle. So Ashley calls up this morning, expresses the situation. We're like, we wholly understand. Baba Bill would tell you, stay with your family. I'm already gone. It's just dust up here. But Ashley, in heroic fashion, got him to the med stop, got the x-rays made, got the diagnosis. The x-rays looked pretty conclusive that there's a broken clavicle up there. Got him back, or got him over to Publix, so he got the requisite number of sweet treats to compensate him for his pain. Got him back home where husband Tyler was waiting with the other two rambunctious kids, waiting for their sweet treats, even though they didn't get injured. And still made it down here in enough time for the full visitation. So she's had an exciting day already. Thank you also for sister-in-law Meredith, Dad's other daughter-in-law from Alabama, for coming down here. Something I'm going to I really feel sorry for my dad about. Meredith and my dad, Meredith is my brother's widow, and my dad have for years had this competition going on game day. She's an Alabama, the elephant people fan. Okay? Dad, of course, is a Bulldog fan, and they would have exceptional weekend conversations, especially when the two were playing each other. And I think it's gotten to a point now, thanks Neil, that Georgia has Alabama's number. And he was going to get to celebrate now for probably 10 weekends, especially one weekend a year, but probably 10 weekends a year, when they play competitive games. He was going to get to celebrate that Georgia was waving goodbye to the elephants left behind. But more sorrowful is that he was a ever-loving, suffering Braves fan. And this is the year that I apologetically say, I think the Braves will probably make it or win the World Series at the expense of my beloved Philadelphia Phillies. So I know he would be excited to have been here for that. Although I think where he's at now, he'll have pretty much a front row seat and free popcorn to whatever games he wants to watch. May even know how they're going to come out before they come out. Try to communicate with Meredith about that. Also want to thank a host of organizations and people who cared for my dad in his last months and weeks of life, including Emory, Houston County, even though the doctors don't have a tendency to talk to you there if you're family. Emory Perry, where they do have a tendency to talk to you. The Oaks of Marshallville Rehab Center, Church Home Rehab Center, Gentiva Hospice, and Janae, Jennifer, and Richard from the hospice who made Dad's last 2 days incredibly comfortable. Patrolman Smith from the Perry Police Department, who pulled me over on Tuesday and let me do something I've never been able to do in my entire life. I've driven for 46 years. I pretty much know the laws of the state of Georgia, whether I'm on the interstate or not. I live in Atlanta. Okay? But one of the church ladies, and I want to thank them too, what I call the church ladies, Ann and Linda, who took care of all the communication involving getting the word out of Dad's condition and what's going on, where he was all the way to the end. Thank you very much for that. More on them later. But Linda, I asked her if she needed something to eat Tuesday. She'd been there all day. And she said, yeah, I could use some fish. And I know she wasn't talking about Snellgroves, which is what first comes to my mind when I hear the word fish. Because it wasn't Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. And those are, of course, the only days where Snellgroves is open. So the second, and it had to be this, was Captain D's, because they're the second finest fish house. But I don't know where Captain D's is in Perry. I'm at the hospital, so I crank up the navigation on the car, and the Apple Play is not on my phone, it's not communicating with the screen. And so I'm driving to Captain D's with my cell phone like this. So I could see everything that was going on, including what's on the map. And I drive by Officer Smith's patrol SUV, and I notice that it pulls out behind me and lights up. So I'm not exactly sure, honestly, what's going on here. It's par for the course today, though. So I pulled over, and Officer Smith comes up the car. He's in a very jovial mood. He's like, I pulled you over because Georgia is a hands-free state. And your hands weren't free. And I see that your plate is a Georgia plate, so I figured you probably know the law in this state. I'm like, you're absolutely correct. I was doing exactly what you were telling me I was doing. I wasn't talking to anybody on the phone. I wasn't texting. I wanted to say, I do that. I know it's English, but I wasn't doing that. I just said I wasn't talking. I wasn't texting. I was going, my dad, and then he asked, he said, do you have an excuse that you want to throw at me for what you were doing? And I'm like, okay. My dad, according to the people in the hospital, is near drawing his last breath. There is a church lady in his room who is hungry. So my navigation system isn't communicating with my cell phone. So I'm holding up the map like this, and I held up the phone and showed him the map on it, blah, blah, blah. And I asked him, do you want to see if there's any text on it? I guarantee you there aren't any. And that's why I was doing what I was doing. And he said, okay. So he took my license, went back to his car. I was back there for maybe 10 minutes or so. Saw him get out of his car. He has the infamous piece of paper in his hand. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get ticketed for this. That's okay. Right, things happen. But he walked up to the car and he said, I am not scared of many things in this world, but I am petrified of a church lady. Because I know who they're working for. If I were to give you a ticket for this, I probably would not last this rest of my shift. So I'm just going to give you this warning citation. First time ever I have let somebody slide on a hands-free charge in this state. In years that I've been handing these out. The first warning. I don't even know how to print this out. I had to punch in a few different buttons, etc. You can tell your church lady she kept you from getting a ticket. So thank you, Officer Smith from the Perry Police Department. Absolutely. I'm intimidated, like I said before, by the legacy that my dad left behind. If you would have asked me 6 weeks ago if Dad was going to make it to 100, like he said he wanted to at Mom's funeral last year, I would have said he'll probably will. He was just as active. He walked very well with a rollator at 93 years old. He walked well with a walker. He drove his car at night at 93 years old with no glasses. Officer Smith probably wouldn't have looked by that. No, it's concerned me a little bit. But he had, in his world, a job to do. And that's to continue living life until there was no more life to live. But I got a call from the last time I saw him at Annabelle was about last week of March. And we had our traditional chicken fingers from Longhorn brought in by me, where we could sit and talk in an unboisterous environment at Annabelle. And he talked about what he was up to, and it was the same old kind of stuff. Nothing was really changing to him. He knew me. He asked questions about my family, daughter. He knew the 3 grandkids' names. He asked me where my next trip was because he wanted to travel all over. It's all the same stuff. Which is why it surprised me a couple of weeks later that the antebellum nurse called and said, "We're going to take your dad to the hospital." This is an answer to the most common comment that I've got from people the past week and people today. "Your dad looks so good last time I saw him a couple months ago, or talked to him a couple months ago. What happened?" Well, it started with a phone call from antebellum that said, "Your dad the last few days has been extremely lethargic. All he wants to do is sleep, no matter where he's at. He's at his table, and we put dinner in front of him. He's just had his head down, sleeping." They thought first that it might have been an extended prayer, but it wasn't. Dad wanted to just sleep. Very lethargic. His blood pressure was low. He was trying to open a milk carton with a pocket knife. Or I'm guessing he was realizing he couldn't control his fingers well enough to open it. I don't know. So he had requested of the nurses not to go to the hospital. Antebellum obviously has a responsibility to call me and what's going on with my relative. And they said, "Our policy here is if he wants to resist going, he certainly can, but he has to have a family member that he's given as a contact," and that's just me, "approve not going." And there was no way I was not going to not approve it. I said, "No, he needs to go with what you're telling me." So he went to Houston County, and over the course of the next 6 days, they determined he had a UTI, urinary tract infection. He was lethargic the majority of the time he was there, but he was answering questions when the questions were asked to him. And he was wanting to keep his eyes closed most of the other time. Rehab from Houston County, the only people that called, Rehab said, "We got him on the side of the bed to stand up and hold on to the bed," which I thought was great progress, but not nearly where he was just a couple of weeks ago. Next day, Rehab and the hospital cleared him to go into another rehab center. He was accepted by Church Home in Fort Valley. When he was transported to Church Home, I was there waiting for him, and that's the first time that I saw my dad where I realized this isn't just another doctor visit for him. This is an issue. And that's when we got in contact with the church ladies and tried to update as to what's going on with my dad. Didn't have to contact them first. They were already banging down the door trying to find me, going, "We haven't heard from Brother Bill in 8 days, and that's rare." But he didn't look like himself at church. Checked him in. We had a conversation for about an hour or so. He could not stay awake. But he did answer the questions that I was asking him. He knew who I was. He did not know what day of the week it was. He knew who my wife was. He knew who his 3 grandkids were throughout this whole ordeal. It was amazing. He forgot me at the end, but not his 3 grandkids. And that's special. Doesn't concern me. We had a good enough time. But after 5 days, after 2 days in Church Home, it reached a point where they thought he had something called C. diff, I think is the way they pronounce it. He could hold nothing down. He wanted to eat nothing. Anything he did eat came right back up. A lot of gastric bowel issues. I don't have to go into details. He was not answering people's questions, and people trying to touch him for rehabilitation purposes were met with my dad just crossing his legs, leg over leg, and basically saying, "I don't want you to touch me." At that point, I thought Dad may be starting a giving up type process in a very quick way. So about the 10th day at Church Home, I get a call at night from the nurse saying, "We are going to transport your father back to Houston County. His blood pressure is very bad. He's laying on his side, like one side is very painful to him, or he can't feel it. He can't talk. He's just grumbling when we ask him questions. So we're going to transfer." EMTs got there and said he's not going to Houston County, he's going to Perry, because we believe he's having a stroke. Perry called the next morning, as they always did, and indicated, yes, Dad had an ischemic stroke. It's not a brain bleed stroke, but that's a stroke where oxygen is cut off to the brain for a short period of time. We're not exactly sure how much damage was done, but he is conscious, he is answering questions. The next day they said we have to transfer him to Houston County from Perry because they're better equipped to handle this. So he goes back to Houston County. I see him there, asking the same series of questions. He's very confused. They diagnose him with another UTI, or the UTI that has continued now for several weeks. Don't know which one. Couldn't get that answer. But after 6 days there, they sign off that he's ready to go back to rehab. His physical illness, C-Def, whatever, is cleared. He's gone through his protocol of antibiotics, and they're ready to let him go. Back to rehab. Church Home, however, rejects him. Says that his objective, and I don't blame him, his objective is to get back to Antebellum, because he considers that his home. We don't see a way to get him back to an assisted living facility short of a miracle. The only thing that we can do for him is to admit him as a nursing home patient, and unfortunately, we have no nursing home beds currently. So my first choice for his outside rehab center, his second choice, and he got to make his choice the first time because he was able to do so. My first choice from the start, the Oaks of Marshallville, steps up and says, we have a rehab bed that we can take. We also have long-term nursing beds if we don't believe the rehab process will be sufficient to get him back to home at the assisted living facility. The Oaks at Marshallville is where Mom passed away. They checked Dad into the room right across the hall from where Mom passed away. They even asked, we have I-5 available. Where Mom passed away, I'm like, that would be a little too weird. So they put him into rehab in I-4, or B4, yeah, I think it was I-4. And he goes right back to where he was at the last rehab center. It takes him about 5 days to basically become non-responsive to anything they're wanting to do. He's not eating anything. He has a shake, it comes right back up. He's not being able to talk. And so they call me late Monday night, this past week, and they say, we're transferring him to the Perry ER. We think he might be having another stroke or something else we don't feel comfortable dealing with here. So they transfer him back to Perry ER, and the Perry emergency room doctor calls me Tuesday morning last week. And he goes through, he says, are you so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, okay. So we have your daughter and your daughter. We have your dad here. Okay? He is the sickest patient in this hospital. Here is his vitals. His BP was, 48/22 or something? He is not responsive to anything. I do believe he also has an upper GI bleed. Here is our suggested course of action, and they went to all kinds of stuff, including blood transfusions. They were going to start a blood pressure drug. It's a death intervention drug, something fed, which he said is painful for him to take, to accelerate the blood pressure to get it back up to life. And he said, which one of these courses do you want to follow? I said, my dad has told me for 30 years there's only one course in this action, and if he's in this condition he's going to follow, and that is none of what you just suggested. Just shut everything else off. I'm not going to turn him into a pincushion for the third time in 3 weeks. He's not getting any better. You're not going to prolong his life anymore. And the ER physician was like, if I have to give my medical proxy to somebody, it's you. You get it. You understand this. I can't tell you, I request you to cut everything off. Okay? I just told you the facts. I think you made the incredibly right decision. So they got the ER nurse on the phone so there could be a witness to be saying, stop all the drugs going to my dad. And she said, I wholly agree with this as well, having spent the last few hours with him. You planning on coming here when? And I'm like, well, my original plan was to come here on Wednesday, the day after Tuesday. And she said, if you want to see him alive, I wouldn't suggest that. I think that he's got between 12 and 24 when we take him off the medications that are keeping him alive. It's okay, got the card. Drove down there, got to the emergency room about noon. The hospice nurse, Janae, was already holding my dad's hand, rubbing his forehead, talking about how so many people from churches had already been there to say their goodbyes. He was not pretty to look at. If you've ever seen death, this is like the second time I've ever seen it. It's not pretty to look at. But for the course of the next 4 hours before they transferred him into a private room, there was probably 20-odd people came by. When he got into his room, there was probably 15 or so more. And the miracle of all that is when they took his blood pressure at 8 o'clock at night, when everybody had left, his blood pressure had doubled. He'd gone up to like 90/50. The hospice doctor came in on Wednesday morning when it was still 90/50, although he wasn't trying to open his eyes anymore, or he couldn't. And he said, this isn't going according to plan. He's holding on for something, because he should be gone by. Is that okay? Well, let's see how long he's going to go. And he waited for some more people to come in on Wednesday. And the people stopped coming in on Wednesday evening. His blood pressure started dropping. And of course, he was gone by Thursday. So it was completely natural, painless, and peaceful for him. And I'm glad that God answered his prayer, and the prayers of all of you who I understand are praying Wednesday night. That God be merciful to this person who's been so merciful to everyone else his entire life. I want to say a special thanks here to Linda Carnes-Webster. I couldn't stop her. Don't know if you've ever met her, but I couldn't stop her. I started to get an idea that she was going to be here for a while. When she got to Dad's room, brought in a sleeping bag, sterno stove, case of water, greasy cups. By the end of Wednesday night, the hospital staff brought her in a Barca lounger to lay in. She says, I'm here for the long term. And for the hours I was there, I would tell you what, if you ever have a relative who is in need of a caretaker in a hospital, who will not hesitate to stand up for the patient, this is the woman. That's what I heard sometimes when she felt that Dad was not being treated exactly correct. She told me her husband Chuck used to tell her, please, please stop talking to these people like that. I have to live with them when you're gone from the room. I heard it once and just like sat back and go, okay, what she said. And I didn't have to do anything the rest of the time. And she was with Dad when he took his last. Sent pictures of him pushing his flag-draped body down the hallway. Thank you very much for that. That's page 1 of 6. I think we've already been through 2, and through 3. I know that my dad meant a lot to all of you. I have heard that all week. He was Dad to me. I and not realize, as I said before, just how much he was doing behind the scenes all the way to the day he died. It's nearly impossible for me, just in, say, an hour, to encapsulate the 75 years of service that he gave to our country and to Godward youth. But I do want to try, I guess, from his perspective. I thought about this going, if my dad had a last thing to say to you, what would it be? And so I started thinking about that. I was like, you know, he has some things about him that were pure him. That you would know if you saw this man, these would be on him. This is the kind of, you would see him in a shirt, just like this. Okay? I say that because when I went to get some clothes for rehab, I noticed he had 8 of this exact type of shirt. John Blair Fine Menswear, and I know how he got them. My mom saw that he liked one. Amazon, 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 Amazon. 8 different colors. In fact, I only get to eulogize him once. So I'm going to try to make myself kind of look like my dad. I'll need that. So I think it's big enough to fit. So this is the John Blair Fine. The wife's going, what is he doing? Okay, he's used to it by now. So, see if we can get it zipped up. There we go. Okay. Little t-shirt be showing right here. And if you ever saw my dad, you see him in 100 of these pictures up here, and you can run the whole thing, Katie, if you want to. It doesn't have to just be on that picture. But if you see my dad in those pictures, the majority of you're going to see him with this little book. It's going to be the spiral-bound top book. It's going to be in here. He also had his glasses case in there. When they had glasses, that would work for him. He would have a pen in there, and sometimes a checkbook, before Mom took the checkbook away. This book told him what to do. Told him who needed him. This is where he wrote down the important things that were going on at that time of life. So he had this book with him when they took him out of Antebellum to Houston County. It stayed with him in his bag of stuff through all of his transfers until his last transfer, and I got it. And I want to just kind of give you an idea of what my dad was thinking right before he went into the hospital for the last time. So you flip, I mean, he's done this since, I can remember when I was like 14 years old. He always would have this pad right there. Spank Jim at 8 o'clock. Okay, let's go. And he would never not do that because it said it in his book. Okay. He gets home at 5 o'clock in the morning because somebody's died, his book is in his shirt. Okay. It's a comfy shirt. First page. Go figure. Snellgrove Fish House. The phone number for Snellgrove Fish House. Apparently, he was going out to Snellgrove Fish House on Thursday the 2nd. And I put 2 and 2 together and later figured out he went out with Linda, I think. Wasn't that the time I think you said that you surprised him and took him out to the fish house? Yes. Next number in here, Nell Wallace. Go figure. Now, it was 4 weeks into my dad's struggle when I got into his room and listened to his answering machine. And I heard the messages from you. I apologize. I did not hear them all. But the woman was checking on Dad religiously. And he apparently got one because he had a number in here to call. Somebody in Alabama, I'm not going to mention that. Marianne Rogers, Talked with them on the phone this week. Brad and Karina, that is Middle Georgia Honor Flight, James Harrison's daughter-in-law and son. He was looking to make a time to go out, spend time with them. Tom and Cindy McFerry. I can say this now because he's dead. These are private, things. Just to tell you what he's up to. Chuck and Linda Webster made a big notation that Chuck had passed. Barbara Martin, that would be my wife. Patton Earl, that was his former banker that's still in Antebellum. His cardiologist was on here. All these people he meant to call. There's his other daughter-in-law from Alabama, Meredith, on here. Where am I? You probably know my name, not yet. Oh, there I am. I'm right after Ortho Georgia. And I recognized the writing he had made me the last time I was there, write my phone number in the book. Because he was having trouble on his flip phone being able to retrieve people. So he was writing the people that meant a lot to him phone numbers down. Ann Strickland, followed by Dupixent. There's another Dupixent again. Apparently he was having some trouble with his drug prescription, Dupixent. So a little bit about what he was doing. If you ever saw my dad preach, you would know this book. This is the only Bible that he ever preached from in 51 years. Got it out of his room the other day. It's a 1964 edition. He's got notes back here in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Every one of the 10 plus churches that he led is in this book. The sermons. When he was the pastor, if you will, at Antebellum, Mom would take sermon outlines. He asked that when they moved from their house, 96 Margie, formerly 102 Oregon, when they moved to Antebellum 6 years ago, he asked that I bring all of his sermon outlines because he was the new minister of the 2 o'clock service on Sundays at Antebellum. And Mom, talk about the team they were, she would type out in much bigger font than was on the original outline so he could easily see it. Well, he ran into a problem that Mom passed away and he still needed to preach. So he would just take his other outlines and use a magnifying glass if he needed one to read it, or very close. There was one outline in his Bible that was the outline of the service he was next going to lead in Antebellum before he left for the last time. The last time he had preached this sermon, he's got up here in his notes, was the 26th day of November, 1995. The AM service at Sandy Valley Baptist Church. That's a long time ago. It's like, what, 28, 29 years ago. But the title of the sermon is Words That Are Needed Today. And Dad never wrote a complicated sermon or delivered a complicated sermon that I ever heard of or witnessed. There was none of this 4th century fundamentalists, blah, 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 said this about the blah, blah, blah. No. Dad just talked in terms that you talk to people at work or at the game. Just simple stuff. He said in this sermon, words that are needed today. 4 types of words that are needed today. And this is just as true today as it would have been 29 years ago. In fact, Dad would say, and this was a big issue for him the last few years of his life when we talked religion, and we did. He would say, this is the King James Bible. It's always been the King James Bible for me. It's the only one I've ever preached from. I'm not saying I don't like other editions. There are a lot of other editions. They might make it easier for people to understand, and that's good. But what I'm concerned with is society saying that the Bible has got to be adapted to current day life. And he said, what is sin in 2023 was sin in 1923. Doesn't matter how you live your life in 2023. It's still the same sin. Don't compromise what you believe is sin because you've got people in there saying, hey, wow, man, we're in the 2020s now. And this is the way there is no book in here called adaptation. There's no chapter. Jesus never says, oh, starting in the 1200s, you need to adapt this to society. Dad would say the book is perfect as it's written. It needs to be lived as it's written. But also know that we've all fallen short. And he wouldn't judge people that fell short, but he had a strong opinion that this book is not to be compromised in terms of what is said. So he had 4 different words that he wants to share. One, words of cheer. He quoted a Bible verse, a merry heart doeth good like medicine. And then in his analysis here, he'd say, words of cheer are needed. Cheerful words help, and this is one to another. Cheerful words help give a right perspective both to those who give them and to those who receive them. Words of comfort would be number 2. And he used the Bible verse in 2 Corinthians, comfort them which are in trouble. And then he gives an analysis, words of comfort are needed. Suffering is eased by comforting words. Let us comfort someone today. Number 3, words of compassion. Having compassion one of another. 1 Peter 3:8. In the analysis, Jesus had great compassion on the sick, suffering, and sinful. We must have compassion on others too. Compassion must come from the heart. My wife's good at this, I know. Compassion must come from the heart. It must reveal a sincere concern and understanding for the hurts and needs of others. And finally, words of Christian love. Ephesians 4:32, and be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. His analysis says words of hatred and strife, and this is 29 years ago, much less today, are prevalent in today's society. Words of Christian love are needed. Simple, easy to follow, easy to understand, and biblical. It's the way he did things. Dad was born in 1932. His father was a stone cutter, a granite cutter, if you will, in in Kennesaw. Worked for the Kennesaw Granite Company. They lived in Marietta. If you wanted a headstone cut back around 1920, that's the dude you called. Up in Kennesaw. In his older age, my dad's dad, wanting to support the family, took a job as a janitor after he retired from granite cutting, didn't physically do it anymore. Took a job as a janitor in the Cobb County school system, where he would push around that formula of dust or whatever at the end of every day to clean up what the students had done during the day. And in his very late years, my grandfather lived by the verse, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to dwell in the tents of the wicked. The tents of the wicked are the people that live in the world, that don't have any use for Christianity. And so I think it was the last 8 years of my grandfather's life, he opened and closed the door in the First Baptist Church of Marietta for everybody that walked through it on Sunday and Wednesday services. But Mom, my grandmother, his mother, she was the real officiant of religion in the household. Dad had 4 brothers and sisters, 5 kids total. Oldest daughter was Mary. She died at 86. Second oldest daughter was Evelyn. She died at 95. Third oldest child was his only brother, James. He died at 86. His youngest sister just died about 5-6 months ago at 95. And then there's Dad, passing away at 93. Talk about a longevity-oriented family. But Mom raised them very specifically. She doesn't get into any of this compromise about religion stuff. And it was this way when I was there visiting. You're in my house for the night, you're going to church. Period. One of their kids wants to move home and they're 26 years old, that's fine. But you're going to church. Period. Whether you be 3 or 103, if you're living there under my roof, that's the rule. Dad's youngest sister, who was the closest one to Charlotte in Texas, who grew up to be a missionary, was born or developed early in life a congenital heart problem and was not supposed to live very long. Dad's mom prayed for her. Every prayer she ever uttered included her daughter Charlotte for 20 years. Until one day Charlotte went for her quarterly inspection or quarterly evaluation, and it was all gone. And Mom, as I understood it, thanked God for the next 20 years for healing her kid who lived to be 95 years old. And with her husband, saw probably every continent in our world doing evangelistic work. He came from religion. He went to Korea, and he was the only one of his brothers and sisters who did not graduate from college. Instead, he went into the service at a relatively young age. Dad was married when he went into the service, but not to my mom. Dad was a divorcee when he married my mom. He shared that with church search committees, including those in Sandy Valley and others. And a couple decided against him because of that. But we'll learn a little bit about that here as we get closer to the end. He went to Korea, and he brought home 2 things from Korea. One was a bullet in his leg that, to the best of my knowledge, he never had removed. And second, so he was a statistic. He was a war injury in Korea. And the second was, apparently the Korean winters were so cold, and they weren't given blankets because blankets weighed too much and weighed the soldiers down. They had a poncho to keep them warm and gathering together, and a fire if they wanted to light it. And Dad suffered chills so badly over in Korea, they followed him the rest of his life. In fact, a couple months before Mom passed away, she had talked about how Dad had told her that he had had chills a couple times the previous week. That had nothing to do with the temperature outside, I can tell you that, it was in the 80s. But when he came home from Korea, and I will add here that the greatest honor of his military career came last April when Middle Georgia Honor Flight decided to fly him as a Korean veteran to Washington on an honor flight to spend the day looking at all the memorials and to end the day getting a medal from the Korean consulate for the peace that we as a nation helped bring to the Korean conflict. And Harrison is here as a group is responsible for that. We certainly appreciate, once again, everything that you guys continue to do in that regard. But he came home from Korea to a wife that was no longer there. She decided their low single-year marriage was not going to work to somebody who would go away for extended periods of time. Dad wrote her a couple letters. Long time ago. Well, mid-50s. Where he tried to get her back. But he never mailed them. How do I know about these letters? Do I poke around in Dad, Mom stuff? Well, yeah, I do, but it's their fault. 6 years ago, they moved to Antebellum, and they left the job of clearing out their house and selling it to me. Mom and Dad never threw away a paper product I think they ever touched, unless it had to do with food or toilet paper. Every subscription, Reader's Digest, Popular Mechanics, Field and Stream, never, ever perfect collections of it. And they had 10 different 3-drawer file cabinets where they kept every bill they'd ever gotten from their house. And of course, all Dad's military paperwork and everything. And they said, "Oh, you're good to clean this out." I went into AFib cleaning out their house. Still take medication for it today. I'm convinced that's what caused it. Even though I went into it almost the exact same time Dad did, and he did okay. But Mom left me with a message. I know you're going to throw a lot of the stuff away. And yeah, Mom, you're right. But keep in mind, Dad, for the last 6-7 years, has cashed every one of his church paychecks. He never deposited any. He did pay tax on them, he said. I'm a CPA, I had to ask him that. But he cashed them all, just in case there was a banking problem. So if he got a check from the church for $250, he would go to his buddy Earl, the corner, and he would cash it. He'd get two, most hundreds you can get, so he'd get 200s and a 50. And he would place it in unique folders around the house and in pages of magazines. And as life went on, he forgot where he put it. So Mom said, you should probably flip through every one of these 6,000 pounds of stuff before you throw it away, because it might have in it something that is valuable. So I'm a CPA, I'm a numbers person, and I'm like, okay, there is no like dollar bill detector that I can run, but I'll certainly flip through this stuff. And in the shed in the back of the house, which is the overflow zone, when Dad had 15 years of Popular Mechanics staked in the house, the olders would go back in the shed. He thought I wanted them, or my brother would want them. And in a box in that shed, there were letters written to a woman. I knew Dad was divorced. He told me that early. But written to a woman whose name I didn't recognize. And of course I opened them. And I read Dad asking her, to reconsider and stuff like that. And so when Dad and I were alone one time early in his antebellum years, I said, I found these letters when I was cleaning out your house. And he looked at him and just started laughing. He said, yes, those are letters that are one of the first true miracles I ever experienced. Because if I had mailed those, she might have taken me back, and I never would have met the woman God had for me. I shredded them the next day, and have never discussed them since, nor has he. And as a postscript, Dad had $28,520 in cash, and $14,000 in silver coins, in unique places in the house. I took it to him and said, what do you want to do with this? He says, why don't you keep it? It's okay, but I'm going to put this in the bank. He said, aren't they going to fill out some report that you put in more than 10 grand? I'm like, yep, they will. And they had the biggest laugh at the bank I've ever heard when I told them the story behind this cash. And Treasury never contacted me, so they were okay with it. That's right. A few years later, Mom comes along and they have 2 sons. My brother William and me. Bill died in 2017. Very unexpected. But I didn't really realize until I started just putting 2 and 2 together why or what God's up to with my brother. He had a role that he fulfilled. God had a role for him that he fulfilled when he was 4 years old, without even knowing. So we're stationed in France, and my brother, I'm Bill's like 4, which means I'm like 2.5, so I don't really have much recollection here. But as I understood, Bill ran into the house and he was very excited because he had found and eaten a yard cookie. A yard cookie, in his mind, was another name for a mushroom, which turns out to be a poisonous mushroom. Within an hour, he was very sick. Dad rushed him to the base hospital. They pumped his stomach. And they told him very frankly, we don't know how much damage this has done. And there's probably 50-50 he won't make it. And Dad said it was that moment that he prayed and made a deal. Dad has always said you can make deals with God. As long as you pick up your talking bargain and he wants to do it. But he prayed and said, if you save my son, as soon as I'm out of the Air Force, I will work for you as a minister for the rest of my days. Well, Bill survived. 1975 comes up. We're back in Warner Robins. And Dad says, God follows his end of the bargain. I'm retiring. I'm going to follow mine. Didn't even take a year off like people do these days to find yourself. He knew where he was. He went to Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas, one of the two. For 3 months, came back with a designation that allowed him to become an ordained minister at his first church, which was Garrison Baptist Church in Warner Robins. We drove by there, Dad and I did. I took him on a tour about 3 months ago of all the important places of his life. And that was on the tour. It's a little white building. Used to have a cross on the top of it. It's right across 247 from the Air Force Base. Right at the end of Watson, right by the Air Force Base. There was probably 25, 30 people there. Met some lifelong friends there. The Glovers, and all their kids, I think, came into our lives at that point in time. The minister of that church was a guy named Jeff Alford, who was in Dad's life for a while. And that's where Dad got ordained as a minister, 51 years ago. After several years there, he got his first church by himself, a church called Community Baptist Church. It is now a satellite Southside Byron. But we were there for several years. Then Dad didn't feel a call to continue there. A couple of deacons were making life difficult. So he decided, even though I've got affirmation of the majority of the population, I want to go somewhere else. And that opened the door for you guys at Sandy Valley, where he was for 17 years. You guys did a great job of writing his obituary. The last day he was at Sandy Valley, you guys put together kind of a thank you and a tribute to my dad. In the end of March of 1998, he retired. Not really retired, he thought he was retiring, but 8 churches later, he still hadn't retired when he went into Annabelle. But in 1998, we have a whole lot of people from Sandy Valley here, some who were here. Here's what the bulletin looked like. Mom didn't throw anything. I told you, paper product, it never hit a garbage can, especially when it had to deal with Dad. March 29th of 1998, here was the bulletin. Pastor was Bill Martin. This is his last Sunday. The Minister of Education was Phil Bryant. Minister of Youth was Alan Camp. The Director of Music was Debbie Dennis. I see people shaking their heads. Yep, remember that. The invitation hymn, It Is Well With My Soul. Keep that in mind. The Deacon of the Week was here earlier. I'm not sure he's still here. Ted Blackman was the Deacon of the Week 28 years ago. They needed some nursery volunteers for the next week to join Emily Tompkins and Kathy Little. They needed prayer warriors because this week's prayer warriors decided to go on vacation. You get the idea. And this is the letter. I think I know whose DNA is on this. But this is what you would call a great tribute to my dad. This is what Sandy Valley wrote to my dad. This could be, by itself, his obituary as a man of God. On your retirement, Brother Bill, this is a time to look back and also to look forward. For as you have been blessed in the past at Sandy Valley, so have we. And we are sure God has blessings for you and Pat in the future, as well as our church. 2 pastors went 40-something years in Sandy Valley. That is a tribute to the quality of the flock at that church. It's a Baptist church with 2 ministers in 40-something years. Amazing. In thinking back on the past 17 years, it would be an enormous job to write down everything. It occurred to me that most of the highlights would be in our history of Sandy Valley, our scrapbooks. First thing I found in the scrapbooks on you, Brother Bill, was this. And this is a direct quote. Bro Bill Martin will preach his trail sermon on December 28, 1980. T-R-A-I-L. Unquote. I think most of us know that meant his trial sermon to serve as interim pastor. The next 3 months, God laid it upon our hearts that you were to shepherd this church. We know that you debated over this, for we have been through some trying times. I think when Dad showed up, there may have been 8 or 9 families left, maybe 20 or 30 people. But God impressed upon your heart that this is where He wanted you. On April 12, 1981, you were called as full-time pastor at Sandy Valley Baptist Church. As you know, our church services were held in the fellowship hall, which had been set up for that purpose. At the time, we were in the Together We Build program to build a sanctuary. As pastor, you continued that vision with us. As you preached, we began to learn things about you. In fact, from the pulpit, you confessed that one of your ears was lower than the other one. Indeed, one was attached and one's unattached. But don't open the box to prove it. That is exactly it. While you were still new to us, the ladies began to notice that your desk was beginning to pile up and get cluttered. Some thought it would be nice to tidy it up. But you let us know right quick not to touch anything. That was the last time we saw your desktop. You should have seen his house, though. As people began to come in your office, particularly the children, they would bring you things. The walls finally were completely covered with pictures. Some were monkeys, some football players, you name it. But it was all because they loved you and you loved them. One of the first things you did at Sandy Valley was to adopt one of the cottages at Meansville Children's Home. We visited and carried gifts to those children. I remember that. You invited them over for one weekend to stay in our homes and worship with us. What a blessing when 8 of them accepted the Lord. Bro Bill, you have always been interested in missions, and I really think you would have liked to be a missionary. What a blessing it was for the church to send you and Pat to Canada on the Eastern Canada Crusade for you to participate in the fall of 1982. As time went on, the church began to grow both in numbers and financially. In fact, we were doing so good. In January of 1983, the church paid off a debt on our parking lot 4 years and 5 months early. A highlight in August of 1984 was when our ACT teams and their leaders attended the National ACT Team Convention in Fort Worth, Texas. That same year, we sponsored one of our families on a mission trip to Indonesia. Coming close to the end. Many times, Bro Bill would hear of needs of people, and he would, from his own pocket, to fill the need. This kind of love overflowed to our church, and financial aid was sent to churches that were struggling in various states. Churches in our own association were helped likewise. In April of 1986, Sandy Valley entered into a letter of intent with a contractor to build a new sanctuary. By December of 1986, it was completed debt-free. Dedication Day was January 25th, 1987. Now Brother Bill could baptize using his own baptismal pool rather than going to other churches or swimming pools to baptize. In April of 1987, a new library was dedicated. This he has always supported is now adding greatly to our book collection from his own shelves. And he had a lot more to give. I can tell you that from his own shelves. The Lord had in mind for Brother Bill another mission trip. This would be to Liberia in Africa in November of 87. We were so proud of him for doing this. We had a little send-off for him, bringing gifts for him to take with him. Someone brought a fly swatter so he could fight the insects in the jungle. Another brought a jar of peanut butter. And still another brought a book for him to read. However, all the pages were blank. Yes, they wanted to write in it. When he returned, he told of how he preached with a flashlight and a megaphone. Every night he had to walk in the dark, trusting a guide to lead him. But he knew he trusted in his real guide, and that was Jesus. There was a time, Brother Bill, that I think we were actually dreading attending one of our conferences. We knew that a certain subject coming up could actually divide our church. Why should we worry? You had already conferred with God, and he gave you the knowledge and the wisdom to handle the situation, and it really brought our church closer together. In 1987, the church had grown enough to hire an associate pastor, and the ministry was started for the senior adults of the church. You have now taken over as the leader of the Fun Lovers, who have chauffeured this senior adult group to many places, and even though you went the wrong way, got a one-way street in the city of Atlanta, this group still trusts you. I don't know what happened. Along about this time, the scrapbooks were beginning to reveal a little white in your hair. Did we do this to you? The fund was established in July of 1989 to buy you hair color. I'm just kidding. To purchase a 15-passenger van. We're now on our second van. The year of your 10-year anniversary, 1991, with Sandy Valley was quite eventful. There was a joint worship service with one of our black churches. Dad loved those. Sandy Valley had its first picture directory. We sent 2 men from our church to Panama to help build churches, and new pew Bibles were purchased. Yes, we worked and we studied, but at times we played too. There were fellowship dinners, softball teams, and in January of 1993, Bro Bill and Pat led several couples from the church on a Bible study cruise. It would go on 47 more. Just kidding. Almost that many. Before Mom's death. Pat must have told him he was getting hot dogs when he got home, because on the ship he was eating every chance he could, and everything he saw, even at midnight. If in May of 93, anyone was driving down Houston Lake Road on that Sunday morning between 11 and 12 noon, and they looked up and they saw a man on the roof of our church, the slide of that, they probably did a flip. Yes, it's Pastor Bill preaching from the rooftop. He keeps his promises. They met a certain attendance goal, and voila. Brother Bill loves his country, and we'll let you know in a minute how he feels. When the threat of closure of Robins Air Force Base came about, every day at noontime, he opened the doors of our church to the public for prayer. He never told me. Praise God, the base is still open. In November of 93, a new position was opened in our church, a minister of education. Now God has blessed us in this area. God has now led us to him, and he is to be our next pastor, Brother Phil Bryan. God led Brother Bill to invite evangelist Fred Burchie to lead several revivals. There was a great outpouring of God's Spirit. So many people came forward, there was not room for them at the front of the church. Many were saved. Under Brother Bill's leadership, all programs of the Southern Baptist Church is in force here. The youth program is something to be proud of, along with our music, Sunday school, discipleship training, deacons, Brother WMU, Children's Church, and Children's Activity Program. Brother Bill, you've conducted ordination services, licensed people to the ministry, anointed our sick, been there when our babies were born, married our people, and buried our loved ones. We know what it means when you say your favorite song is, "It is well with my soul," for I know that God is smiling on you and Pat. Your favorite Bible passage, Psalms 91, says in verses 1 and 2, "He who dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High God shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust." This passage has been a comfort to you when you were in danger and in need. For your years of retirement, just hold on to these words. We can never be able to express to you and Pat what all you have meant to us. We love you both. Just remember, retirement is not the end, it is only the beginning. And it was the beginning of 18 more years. Going from church to church in interim capacities, in full-time capacities when the church needed a pastor. And his legacy is in the hundreds of people who used to be in those churches who have contacted me over this past week. I certainly appreciate your time. I could go for another hour, but he's probably tired up here. He's the main event, and I needed to leave him some water. God love everybody. Remember what he said, whatever it is that you remember the most. Take it to heart. Thank you.
Remember me in a Bible cracked and faded by the years. Remember me in a sanctuary filled with silent prayer. Days you wait and heart to heart, bound by grace and peace. Child of wonder, child of God, I remember you. Remember me. Remember me when the color of a sunset fills the sky. Remember me when your praying tears are joy fall from your eyes. And days you wait and heart to heart, bound by grace and peace. Child of wonder, child of God, I remembered you. Remember me. Remember me when the children leave their Sunday school with smiles. Remember me when you're old enough to teach, old enough to preach, old enough to lead. To wait and hard to hold, bound by grace and peace. Child of wonder, child of God, I remember you. Remember me. It's raining hard to hide, child of wonder, child of God. Remember me. It's raining hard to hide, child of wonder, child of God.
If you have a program, you see by my name, close in prayer. No, I didn't get that. Jim, I appreciate so much opportunity to share just a little bit today. You know, the song, Remember Me. All of us would agree that it's not a problem to remember Brother Bill. We found out a whole lot more about it today than we've known in the past. But it's been a blessing of mine over the years to have developed a relationship with him and just enjoy being with you. And we could all agree if we just started writing words down that would describe him, it would be interesting to see what all those words would be. I feel like that we would all say he was a wonderful man of God. He wasn't ashamed about God or God's Word. He loved the Bible. And I didn't know that about that particular Bible that he preached every sermon out of that Bible. I think that when we talk about what was important to him, of course his family and loved ones and the congregations that he served, but he was so in love with the Lord and God's Word. And I think, it's pretty safe to say, one of the things that Brother Bill wanted more than anything else was when he met a relationship with a person and began to know them, he really wanted them more than anything else to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. In the last few months of visiting there, it was a joy for me to sit there and let him tell me about the people in Annabella that he had led to Christ. One particular one was 94 years old. He led him to Christ. I think if you're going to get saved, it's a good time at 94. But that's just the way Brother Bill was. And so we would talk about that and hear from that. I could have spent more time today talking about what Paul said to Timothy, I believe Bill would want to say to us. My time of departure is at hand. He called me several weeks before the term for bad began to happen, but he knew things were heading in the direction of heaven, and he wasn't going to complain about that. But he called me and asked me about a particular preacher who was also a resident at Annabella, used to be on my staff, and he said, I'm fixing to turn my Bible study over to somebody else. I said, well, that shocks me. I thought as long as you could talk, you were going to teach. He said, well, I just know it's about time. And there's a guy here in our home, and his name is Mike Scarborough. Some of you may know Mike. Wonderful man and a great Bible teacher. And I talked to some folks today from Annabella, and I asked them about Mike, and oh yes, he's doing the job, and he's a wonderful teacher. So that was important to Brother Bill when he was getting ready to go to heaven, that he could hand it off to somebody else that would continue teaching the Word of God. And he said, Paul said to Timothy, I fought a good fight, and I believe Brother Bill was a fighter for the position that he had as a child of God. Not just for our country when he went to Korea, but also in spiritual warfare and how he was involved in that and helping people in their walk with God. He knew what was involved in fighting for the Lord, standing up for His Word and the principles of truth. All that. I fought a good fight, and he was successful in fighting for the things of God and the things that God said to him were important. But he said, I had finished my course. I believe he knew that was coming. He didn't know necessarily what day, but I believe he knew it was coming. I believe he was trying to say to us, as far as I know, God's asked me to do. I fulfilled every assignment God's given to me. And so I finished my course. Paul said I kept the faith. And I'm so thankful that here, when you look at a man's life, all these years, and with Miss Pat and the journey they put together, he never walked away from his faith. He kept his faith, but he made sure that not only in the keeping of his faith, that he was sharing his faith. Again, what he knew that Christ had done for him, he wanted to make sure that happened in every person's life that he met. So I'm thankful for, again, that life. And I just want to close by, you said that, I just want to close. I think the word that just keeps coming to my mind as I prayed, been knowing for a long time, that they asked me to give Ms. Pat to have the honor of speaking at their service. But I was thinking of all the words that came to my mind. I just kept going back to the word servant. I just saw him as a servant. Not just that he was a servant. I know he read Psalm 100 a bunch of times. You know, serve the Lord with gladness, the psalmist said. And Brother Bill did. I think in the book of Acts it talks about, I wrote it down in case you were important about the scripture, Acts 20, verse 19. Serve the Lord, again, with all humility of mind. Brother Bill was a humble man. And again, I just see him as a servant. That's how he served others. And then he humbled himself. You know, if you want to know what God's like, we all have to look at Jesus, and that gives us an answer. If we want to know what Jesus is like, we all will look at Christians and give an answer. And I believe Brother Bill was one of those Christians. He wanted to look like Jesus, live like Jesus, act like Jesus. Remember Philippians 2:7 talking about Jesus, but it could be talking about Brother Bill. He humbled himself and took on the form of a servant. So I'm grateful to have the privilege of knowing him, working together for the kingdom with him. When I was on the staff, West Side, I was in charge of Wednesday night Bible studies. There were times that I just felt in my heart I was going to be there. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't going to be out of town. But I just said, the man's got something to say. He's going to be sharing the Word of God with us. I think it was also one of those things that sometimes people who serve the Lord so faithfully and for a long period of time are somehow put out of pasture. We don't need you anymore. We're through with you. We're on with somebody else. I never did really like that. So every so often I just say, hey, Bill, how about teaching for us on such and such a Wednesday night? Where are you going to be? I'm going to be right there. But I want you the opportunity to do that. As Jim said, all the other churches that he helped, and pastoring and interim work and the congregations that he ministered to. What a servant. He served the Lord in a powerful, courageous way, consistent way. I have a preacher friend. He made this statement one day. And boy, in the last few days, I've just been coming to my mind in relationship with Brother Bill. This guy said, you know, I'm looking forward to getting to heaven. And I'm looking forward to hearing God say something. And he talked about God's heavenly kitchen. I'm listening. But when he said what he said, I thought, if I ever have a chance, and I believe it applies to somebody, I want to use this. So this has been years ago. But Brother Bill passing brought it to my mind. Here's what the guy said. I want to get to heaven. And I want God to be up there speaking. And I want him to go take me over there to heavenly kitchen. And I want to open the oven door. And I want to hear Jesus say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Amen. I don't know if there's a kitchen in heaven, but I believe with all my heart, who have heard those words. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Would you pray with me? Lord, this is a special day, and we have come to honor the life and legacy of a special man. He was your man, filled with you and your word. Thank you for his walk and for his witness. Lord, I know that if there is a possibility that anybody in this room that has never been saved and never had a desire for Christ to come in and live in their heart, forgive them of their sin, and be made a brand new creature. Lord, I know Brother Bill's heart would love for that to happen today in this place. The dad, the granddad, the grandmother, housewife, don't know, but you know. Nothing would honor the life and witness of Brother Bill more than the day that we honor him. You trusted Jesus as your Savior. I pray that you acknowledge again your own sinful condition, lost and without Christ on your way to hell. Brother Bill would say, listen, there is a way, and his name is Jesus. The only way, the only truth, the only life. I pray, Lord, for that person in this room. Have that encounter with you, prompted and led by the Holy Spirit, that you would birth them into the family of God. And we thank you for this special, special man and the impact he's had on thousands of lives, in which he gives you over the years, over and over and over, all the honor and all the glory. Thank you for the relationship we had with you, and that we get to leave here today being reminded of his favorite song, It Is Well.
Like a tender my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, wherever thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. Though Satan should profit, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control that Christ hath required my helpless estate, and hath shed My soul is worth with my soul is love is worth my soul.
You can cut it off for me.